The ache of silence is what I'd come for, not the dead. Hollow silence of an empty hospital room, but the living quiet of rustling leaves, distant lawnmowers, and the gentle tink-tink-tink of a neighbor's wind chime. Willow Creek Estates. The name itself sounded like a sigh of relief. After 30 years of designing things to withstand the absolute worst of humanity, embassy gates, reinforced checkpoints, anti-ram barriers in places I can't name, all I wanted was to withstand nothing at all. I wanted to plant roses, tinker in my workshop on birdhouses instead of blast-resistant doors, and drink coffee on a porch that wasn't screened in with ballistic mesh. My wife, Sarah, would have loved this place. She'd have loved the optimistic, almost foolishly cheerful yellow front door of our new ranch-style house. She'd have loved the corner lot, with its sweep of lawn and the charming, slightly rickety white split-rail fence that marked the property line. It was decorative, a suggestion of a boundary more than a barrier. It was the kind of fence that said, "Welcome," not "keep out." I'd lost Sarah to the slow, creeping theft of cancer a year prior. And this house, this quiet, was my attempt to find a frequency she might still exist on. It was a place to heal. I was on my knees, knuckles deep in the rich, dark soil, planting the first of the peace roses, her favorite, when the shadow fell over me. It was a shadow so large and sudden, it felt like a solar eclipse. I looked up, blinking against the glare. A white SUV, a model so enormous it seemed to defy municipal road width regulations, had glided to a silent stop at my curb. It was the color of a refrigerator and had the same amount of personality. The driver's side window hummed down, revealing a woman who seemed to be constructed entirely of sharp angles and synthetic fibers. She wore a high ponytail so tight it pulled the corners of her eyes taut. A turquoise visor, even in the shade, sat low on her brow, and a clipboard was clutched to her chest like a Kevlar plate. "Mr. Jansen." Her voice wasn't a question. It was an accusation. It scraped the air. "Just Mark, please. Hello." I stood, wiping my earthy hands on my jeans, offering a neighborly smile that seemed to bounce off her like a dull rubber ball. "I am Barbara Peters," she announced, as if I should have known. "I am the president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association." I glanced at the passenger seat. Another woman, a slightly paler, thinner version of the driver, stared at me without blinking. Her hair was a brittle blonde helmet. She just watched. "A pleasure to meet you," I said, my smile faltering. "I'm just getting settled in. It's a lovely neighborhood." Barbara Barb made a tisk sound that seemed to start in her sinuses. "That is lovely. However, we've already had a complaint." "A complaint? I've been here 2 days." "Your moving van," she snapped. "A King Mover truck. License plate KL5883N. It was parked on the street." She tapped her clipboard. "From 8:02 a.m. until 4:15 p.m. on Tuesday. Per Section 7G, commercial vehicles over 1 ton are not permitted on community streets for more than a 4-hour loading, unloading window." I was baffled. They were moving my life. It took 8 hours. 4 hours is the allotted time. We could fine you $300 for the overage, plus a $50 per hour penalty. Totals $500. My throat tightened. $500 for moving in. "We are waiving the fine, Mr. Jansen," she said, her voice implying this act of magnanimity was physically painful for her. "As a one-time welcoming gesture, but we are documenting it." The silent woman in the passenger seat, her sister, I'd later learn, Carol, the HOA treasurer, made a meticulous note on her own clipboard. Thank you," I managed. I'll be sure to read the CC&Rs more carefully. Barb's gaze drifted from my face down to the rosebush in my hands. Her lips pursed so tightly they vanished. And that? What is that? It's a rose. A peace rose. Section 4B. Landscaping, she recited from memory, her eyes cold. All flora, including but not limited to annuals, perennials, shrubs, and trees, must be selected from the approved cultivar list, provided in Appendix E. Is peace on the list? I stared at her. I have no idea. It was my late wife's favorite. We are not interested in sentimental justifications, Mr. Jansen. The word sentimental sounded like an obscenity on her tongue. The list is the list. If it is not on the list, you have until Friday to remove it. Failure to comply will result in a $50 daily fine. She didn't wait for a response. The window hummed up. As the Escalade pulled away, the driver cut the corner sharp. Very sharp. The front passenger side tire rolled directly over the end of my charming split-rail fence, pressing the post into the soft sod. It didn't break. Not this time. But it left a muddy black smear on the white wood and a deep rut in my new lawn. Barb didn't look back. Carol, however, turned her head, and her eyes met mine through the rear window. She was smiling. I stood there for a long time, the rosebush heavy in my hands. The silence I'd craved was suddenly filled with a low, humming static. This wasn't a stressed suburbanite. This was a warden, and I'd just moved into her prison. I looked at the muddy track, the tilted post, and the sterile white monolith disappearing down the street. My past life, the one spent calculating impact tolerances and hostile vehicle mitigation, felt a long, long way away. But as I knelt to plant the rose anyway, a small, dormant part of my brain, the part that lived for schematics and stress tests, quietly whispered, inadequate boundary, poor materials, high-risk environment. I sighed, tamping the soil around Sarah's rose. This is fine, I muttered to myself. It's just paperwork. I can handle paperwork. I've briefed generals. I can handle a neighborhood president. But the sight of that smug, smiling face in the back window lingered. This wasn't about the rules. It was about the power. And they had just fired the first, very petty, shot. The first magenta-colored envelope arrived 3 days later. It wasn't in the mailbox. It was taped to my bright yellow front door, the adhesive leaving a gummy, impossible to remove residue. The color, I would learn. Was their signature a shock and awe campaign of pastel? I peeled it off, the paper thick and expensive. Inside, on heavy cardstock bearing the Willow Creek Estates embossed logo, an idyllic-looking willow tree that now seemed menacing, was an itemized list of my transgressions. Violation, Duorzao 1 Code, 4B, landscaping, installation of non-approved flora, peace, rose. Fine 50 wars. Violation, Verzor 2 Code, 8A, refuse container, municipal issue, black visible from street past 8:00 p.m. on collection day. Observed at 8:17 p.m. Fine, 25 juror. Violation, Duro 03, Code 4EF, property maintenance, unspecified landscaping debris, small pile of twigs, approx. 12, x8, present on front lawn. Fine, 75 dollars. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a simmering, analytical rage. $87. I had been out back, in my workshop, organizing my tools, the trash can. Pickup was at 6 p.m. I'd forgotten to wheel it back for 2 hours. The twigs were from the oak tree on the community green that overhung my property. And the rose. The damn rose. I was a man of logic. A man who believed in systems. If a system was broken, you fixed it. You didn't just pay. I decided to be the good neighbor. I would go to them. I would explain. I would clarify the rules. And we would find a reasonable path forward. This was America. After all, you could talk to people. I grabbed my checkbook, a preemptive olive branch, and walked the 150 yards across the street to their house. It was a mirror image of mine, only larger, and painted a soul-crushing shade of beige. It was, of course, immaculate. The lawn looked like it was cut with scissors. I rang the bell. A chime, loud and obnoxious, played the first few bars of the Star-Spangled Banner before it could finish. The door was pulled open. Carol stood there, the silent sister, up close. She was all sinew and bone, her skin pale and papery. She wore a beige cardigan over a beige turtleneck. She just stared at me. "Hello, Carol," I said politely. "Is Barb home? I'm Mark Jansen. I just wanted to discuss these notices." She didn't speak. She just opened the door wider and stepped back, her eyes never leaving mine. I stepped inside. The house smelled of Windex, industrial-strength potpourri, and something faintly, unpleasantly feline. The carpet was a shade of beige, so light it was almost white, and so clean I felt guilty for standing on it. "She's in the office," Carol whispered, her voice a dry rustle. She pointed down a hall. The office was clearly a converted dining room. Barb was seated behind a massive mahogany desk, on a black leather chair so large it looked like a throne. Carol slipped past me and sat at a smaller, secretary-style desk in the corner, where a massive adding machine and stacks of magenta envelopes sat at perfect right angles. "Mr. Jansen." Barb didn't look up from her computer. "We are very busy. Are you here to pay?" "I am," I said, holding out the checks. "But I was hoping we could talk about them first, to avoid any future misunderstandings." Carol snatched the checks from my hand with a speed that was startling. Her skeletal fingers, adorned with several gaudy, gold-plated rings, wrapped them on her desk before she began logging them in a ledger. "There is no misunderstanding," Barb said, finally gracing me with her attention. "The rules are in the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. You signed them at closing, a binding contract. Ignorance is not an excuse." "I understand that," I said, keeping my voice level. "But $75 for a small pile of twigs from the community tree." "Section 4F, she said, her voice a monotone. "All properties must be kept free of debris. It does not specify the origin of said debris. Your property, your responsibility." And the trash can. I was 17 minutes late. "8 p.m. is 8 p.m., Carol whispered from her corner, not looking up from her adding machine, which she was now tapping with ferocious speed. Ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ching. 17 minutes, 17. I took a deep breath. This was not a negotiation. It was a tribunal. Okay, I'll be more diligent. But the rose. The fine is $50. Is that a one-time fine? Barb leaned back, a predator's smile touching her thin lips. "Oh, no, Mr. Jansen. That is a daily fine. As of today, you are 3 days non-compliant. You owe another $150. I was stunned. $200 for one flower. It is a violation. The fine accrues until the violation is cured. Cured. Removed, Carol hissed. Dug up. Destroyed. This, I couldn't do. It was a small, stupid thing. But it was Sarah's. It was the one piece of her I had planted in this new, sterile place. Listen to me, Barb, Carol. The rose stays. It means a great deal to me. My late wife, it was her favorite. I will fill out any form you want. I will submit it to the Architectural Review Committee. I am the Architectural Review Committee, Barb said, her eyes glittering. And I do not approve. We are not interested in your dead wife's preferences. We are interested in compliance. Remove it by tomorrow, or the daily fine doubles. My fists clenched. The polite, retired engineer was fading, and the man who had stared down stubborn colonels in 120-degree heat was surfacing. You are being unreasonable. I am being consistent, she retorted. We expect payment for the outstanding $150 by noon tomorrow, taped to our door, if you please. We don't like unannounced visitors. I was being dismissed. I turned to leave, my blood feeling thick and hot in my veins. As I walked down the hall, I passed their living room. It was as sterile as the rest of the house, except for a large, gaudy trophy case. It was filled with trophies, and every single one was for a demolition derby. First place, Duchesses of Destruction. Third place, Metal Mayhem. And there, in a large, silver-plated frame, was a photo of a younger Barb and Carol, covered in mud, grinning maniacally, holding a twisted, mangled car door. I stopped, stared at it. That explained the Escalade. That explained the accidental nudge of my fence. This wasn't just about control. It was about a love of destruction. Carol was behind me. I hadn't even heard her move. Get out, she whispered. I walked out into the bright sunshine, which now felt harsh and judgmental. I went home. I tore up the checks I'd written. I walked into my pristine workshop, bypassing the birdhouse supplies, and sat at my high-end CAD workstation. I pulled up the survey documents for my property. Then, I created a new, password-protected folder on my hard drive. I labeled it Project Willow Creek. Inside, I created a text file. I documented the entire conversation, word for word. I scanned the violation notices. I took a high-resolution photo of their trophy case from my front porch. Using a telephoto lens, I logged the time, the date, and the K-chunk sound of Carol's adding machine. I was no longer a neighbor. I was a case officer, and I had just begun my file on 2 domestic hostiles. 2 weeks bled into 3. The magenta envelopes became a daily ritual. My peace rose. A single, stubborn plant was now a $1,250 liability. I refused to pay. I refused to remove it. Instead, I sent a single, polite, certified letter to the HOA, their beige house, stating that I was disputing the fines as arbitrary and capricious, and was placing the farcical amounts into a separate escrow account, pending legal mediation. I included a copy of the state code regarding reasonable HOA covenants. This, I learned, was like poking a hornet's nest with a cattle prod. I woke up on a Tuesday morning. The air was still, too still, and it smelled wrong, acrid, like a chemical plant. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, and my eyes fell on the window overlooking the front flower bed. I dropped my mug. It shattered on the tile. The flower bed was a wasteland, a white, crusty, chemical desert. The peace rose was a brown, withered skeleton. The leaves were black and shriveled. Even the soil itself looked dead, poisoned. They had come in the night and salted the earth. They had poured gallons of concentrated herbicide not just on the rows, but on the entire patch of ground where I had knelt, full of hope. Only weeks before, I walked outside in my bare feet, the chemical crust crunching under my heels. The smell of industrial-grade poison was overwhelming. It wasn't just herbicide. It was rock salt, a deliberate, scorched earth message. Nothing will grow here. My grief was so sudden and sharp it felt like a physical blow. This wasn't a fine. This wasn't a rule. This was a violation. They had crossed a line from petty tyranny into something else. Something truly hateful. And then I saw the fence. It wasn't just the one post, nudged and smeared with mud. It was the entire corner section. 2 posts were snapped clean at the base, the wood splintered and sharp. The rails were on the ground, cracked in half. It wasn't a nudge. It had been hit. Hard. I knelt, my hands brushing over the splintered wood, and there, embedded in the white paint, were chips of another paint, a glossy, pearlescent white, refrigerator white, and in the soft dirt, now poisoned, were the deep, distinctive tread marks of an all-terrain tire, the exact kind of tire on their Escalade. They had come in the night, doused my wife's memorial in poison, and then, for good measure, had simply driven over the fence. My blood didn't run hot. It ran cold, ice cold. This was a new phase. I did the logical thing first. I called the police, an officer, a young guy named Harris. Came out. He was polite, sighed a lot, and took notes. Honestly, sir, he said, kicking at the poisoned dirt. This is an HOA dispute. We see it all the time. It's vandalism, sure. But without a witness, without a camera, my hands are tied. It's their word against yours. And that Barb Peters, she's got the mayor on speed dial. He looked at the dead rose. I'm sorry about your plant, though. That's just mean. He left. I was alone. An hour later, as I was sweeping up the broken pieces of my coffee mug, another magenta envelope was taped to my door. I didn't even flinch. I just tore it open. Violation. HOA 27 Code. 4F. Property maintenance. Failure to maintain property in good repair. Broken fence. Corner of lot. Fine, 250. Wise. Violation. HOA 28 Code. 4C. Landscaping. Uncured landscaping violation. Dead, dying flora. Fine, 100 $. They had destroyed my property, and then, in the light of day, had fined me for it. I walked into my workshop, the bright, clean space that was supposed to be for birdhouses. I sat at my CAD station, the dual 4K monitors humming to life. I pulled up the property survey. I pulled up the county building codes. I pulled up the Willow Creek CC&Rs. I read Section 9C, fencing and barriers. It was specific. All boundary fencing must be of a white split rail or white picket design, not to exceed 48 inches in height. Materials must be of pressure-treated lumber or HOA-approved wood composite material. I highlighted HOA-approved wood composite material. Then, I went to a different, triple encrypted partition on my hard drive, the one that held my old life. I pulled up a file named Project Bastion. It was a design I'd done for a low-profile embassy perimeter. It looked like a decorative planter, but it was designed to stop a suicide bomber's truck. I looked at Project Bastion, then at the CC&Rs, then at the survey of my property line. I started a new file. I named it Project Gardener. I began to run calculations. Soil density of Willow Creek, average frost line, I researched the exact curb weight of a 2024 Cadillac Escalade, 5'8", pounds. I calculated the kinetic energy of that mass at 15 miles per hour, the likely speed of their corner-cutting maneuver. KE, Y1, 2MEV2. The numbers lit up on my screen. I designed a footing, not a 12-inch post hole, a 10-foot deep, 3-foot wide cylinder of reinforced concrete. I went online, to the website of a specialty material supplier I used to work with. I looked up wood grain structural composites. Then, I looked at steel. A572, grade 50 steel stock, beams, plates. I picked up my phone. It wasn't the police I called. It was an old friend. Frank, yeah. It's Mark Jansen. I'm great. Retired. You know. Yeah, it's quiet. I paused, looking at the dead rose through the window. Listen, Frank, I've got a personal landscaping project. I need to source some materials. No, nothing big. I need 3 12-foot lengths of 8-inch I-beam. Yeah, 80 pounds per foot. That's the one. And I need you to quote me on some custom-milled solid steel bars. But I need them clad in a photorealistic white oak composite. Must be UV resistant. Can you do that? Great. Send the invoice to my private consulting firm. And Frank, this is a no shipping order. I'll have a private courier pick it up. Discretion is appreciated. I hung up. I looked at the magenta envelope on my counter. I took a 4-inch structural lag bolt from a bin on my shelf. I pinned the fine to my wall, right through the words, "Failure to maintain." You want a maintained fence, Barb, I said to the empty room. You'll get one. The repair on the wooden fence was, by necessity, temporary. I bought identical pine posts, identical rails, and used a high-strength epoxy and wood screws to put it back together. It looked perfect, a shining white symbol of my compliance. I even resodded the poisoned earth, digging out 2 feet of toxic soil and replacing it. I didn't plant a new rose. Not yet. I just put down fresh, green grass. My compliance, and my police report, had been a mistake. I had escalated. Now, they escalated back. The battleground shifted from my lawn to the digital space. The Willow Creek Neighbors private Facebook group, which I had joined in my first optimistic week, suddenly became a gallery for my public execution. It started subtly, a passive-aggressive post from Barb Peters. Good morning, neighbors. A gentle reminder that all exterior improvements, including fence repairs, must be submitted to the ARC for approval. We had a resident this week perform an unauthorized repair. We appreciate the effort, but rules are rules. We must protect our property values. Then, a few days later, after I'd installed 2 small, discreet security cameras on the eaves of my house. Concerned neighbor post. It has come to the board's attention that a certain resident on Cornerview Doctor has installed surveillance equipment. While we all value security, having cameras pointed at public streets and neighboring homes feels like a gross violation of privacy. This isn't the city. Folks, we are a family community. This kind of behavior is frankly creepy. The comments flooded in. Brenda, from 2 streets over. Oh my goodness. How awful. Who does that, Barb? You and Carol do so much to keep us safe. Thank you for alerting us. Gary, from the cul-de-sac. I knew there was something off about that guy. I saw him just staring at my dog yesterday. Probably filming him. Unbelievable. I hadn't been staring at his dog. I'd been admiring its leash. But the narrative was set. I was creepy camera guy. Then Carol, the silent sister, weighed in. Her first public post. It was a masterwork of slanderous insinuation. As treasurer, I feel I must inform the community. The resident in question, Mr. M. Jansen, 124 Corner View, is currently delinquent on over $2,000 in lawfully levied fines. He refused to cure a simple landscaping violation, a non-compliant shrub, and became verbally belligerent and threatening during a meeting at the HOA office. We are deeply concerned for the board's safety, as this individual seems unstable. Please be aware and keep your children close. My head swam. Belligerent. Threatened. I had been the picture of placid frustration. But how do you fight that? How do you argue with a lie that's already been accepted as truth? The isolation was immediate and brutal. The friendly wave from the mailman. He now just left the mail and hurried off. The nod from Gary walking his corgi. He now crossed the street, pulling his dog close. To avoid walking on my sidewalk, I went to the community mailbox. A woman who I think was Brenda was there. She physically gasped, grabbed her letters, and scurried to her car, locking the door. I was a pariah. They had poisoned my land, and now they were poisoning my reputation. This, I realized, was their true power, not the fines, which I could afford, not the escalade, which was just blunt force trauma. It was this, the social shiv, the whisper campaign that could turn a peaceful retirement into a lonely, isolated prison. I went home. The silence of my house suddenly heavy and cold. I poured a whiskey, the first in months. I sat in my workshop and looked at my own new cameras. I'd installed them because of the vandalism. I checked the feeds, and my blood went cold again. The night of the fence crash. The camera covering that corner had a 2-minute gap in the footage, right at 3:17 a.m. It wasn't a glitch. The timestamp jumped. I went into the camera's system log, into the deep code I knew how to read. It wasn't a power failure. It was a targeted high-gain radio frequency burst, a jammer. These women, these duchesses of destruction, with their beige cardigans and adding machines, had used an RF jammer to block my camera, commit their vandalism, and then leave. My internal monologue, the one I'd been having with myself, shifted. They are not amateurs, or they have access to someone who isn't. This is interesting. They think they're isolating a sad old man. They have no idea what isolated really means. I've lived in isolated compounds for months at a time. This is just an inconvenience. I turned back to my CAD station. Project Gardener needed an upgrade. A jammer meant they were sophisticated. Slander meant they were desperate. Property damage meant they were bold. This wasn't just about stopping a truck anymore. This was about catching it. I pulled up the schematics again. I added a new element, a hidden, grade-level containment loop, a custom-forged, hardened steel plate designed to act as a vehicle snare. Hidden just below the sod, it would not only stop the truck, it would hold it. I picked up the phone again. Frank Mark, I have an addendum to my order. The temporary fence didn't last a week. They hit it again. Not hard enough to break it, just hard enough to knock it askew. I repaired it. They hit it again. I repaired it again. The fines for failure to maintain were now stacking up at a rate of $250 each. I wasn't paying. My escrow account was growing. My lawyer, a shark named Harrison, who used to handle my Defense Department contracts, was practically salivating. Let them. Mark. He'd cackled over the phone. Let them build the gallows. We'll spring the trap. But the slander was mutating. The Facebook posts became more and more unhinged. I was no longer just creepy camera guy. I was stockpiling chemicals. It was 2 bags of Scott's Turf Builder. I was conducting an illegal business from my home, my hobby workshop. where I was now fabricating the steel components for Project Gardener. Then, the sirens. It was a Thursday morning. I was in my kitchen, grinding coffee beans. The sound was distant at first, then rapidly grew to a deafening wail. It wasn't a police car. It was multiple sirens, big ones. I looked out the front door. My quiet, peaceful street was a sea of flashing red lights. 2 massive fire engines, a battalion chief's SUV, and a hazmat truck. My neighbors were pouring onto their lawns, pointing, filming with their phones, and across the street, on their immaculate beige porch, stood Barb and Carol, arms crossed, watching with expressions of grim, profound satisfaction. Before I could even process it, a fireman in full turnout gear, air pack and all, was banging on my front door. Bang, bang, bang. "Sir, this is the fire department. We need you to evacuate the premises immediately. We've had a report of a significant chemical spill and possible explosive materials." I was so baffled I just opened the door. "What explosive? I'm making coffee." "Sir, we need you to come outside. Now." I stepped out onto my lawn, coffee mug still in hand. The fire chief, a grizzled man with Miller on his jacket, was striding toward me. "You Mr. Jansen?" "I am. What on earth is this?" "We received an anonymous tip, sir, a very detailed one. Said you were storing large quantities of ammonium nitrate and fuel oil in your garage. Said you had a workshop full of triggering devices." My mind raced. Ammonium nitrate, fertilizer, fuel oil, the can for my lawnmower, triggering devices, my soldering iron. "This is insane," I said. "This is a malicious prank. It's those women." I pointed at Barb and Carol, who were watching, drinking their own coffee. "I have to check, sir. My men are going in." "Go ahead," I said, my voice flat. "Be my guest." Chief Miller and 2 of his hazmat-suited men walked through my front door. I stood on the lawn, the entire neighborhood staring at me, judging me. Brenda was there, clutching her bathrobe. Gary was there, filming. I was the neighborhood terrorist. Miller was in my house for 10 minutes, 10 of the longest, most humiliating minutes of my life. Finally, he emerged, mask off, face hard as granite. He was holding one of my bags of Scott's Turf Builder. He walked right past me, across the street, and up to Barb's porch. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low growl that carried across the silent street. Barb's smile was taut. "Chief, is the area secure? We were so worried." Miller held up the bag of fertilizer. This is what you called in." "That's it," Barb said, her voice rising, triumphant. "Ammonium nitrate. That's what they make bombs with. He's a terrorist. I told you he's unstable." Chief Miller's face went from stone to thunder. "Ma'am," he yelled, and the entire street jumped. "This is lawn fertilizer. Do you have any idea how many thousands of bags of this are in every Home Depot, every Walmart? In this entire state, right now, you called in a Class 4 felony false report. You scrambled 2 engines, a chief, and a county-level hazmat team, costing the taxpayers about $10,000 for lawn care." Barb's face went white. Carol, behind her, actually stumbled. But the chemicals, he's threatening. He's unstable." "Is he?" Miller shot back. He turned and looked at me, standing on my lawn, still holding my coffee mug, wearing slippers. "He looks like he's making coffee to me. You, on the other hand, look like you're filing a false report to harass a neighbor you have a dispute with." Miller's eyes, As he turned back to me, were sharp. His gaze drifted past my shoulder, into my garage. The fireman had left the door open, and, on my workshop wall, partially obscured by a shop rag, was a plaque I'd forgotten was even there. It was a brass plate on walnut. The light caught the embossed seal. The words, Presidential Citation for Meritorious Service, and United States Army Corps of Engineers, Kabul Sector, were just visible. Miller saw it. His expression changed. It went from anger to a sudden, sharp understanding, a flash of recognition. He nodded, just once, to himself. He turned back to Barb. "You are in a lot of trouble. Ma'am, I am filing a formal complaint with the city prosecutor's office. This was a gross and dangerous misuse of my team. We're done here." As the trucks roared back to life, their lights blessedly extinguished, Miller walked over to me. He handed me his card. "Mr. Jansen," he said, his voice low, "I am profoundly sorry for the intrusion, and thank you for your service." He'd seen the plaque. "He's a good man," I said, "just doing his job." "This wasn't his job," Miller said, glaring at the Peters house. "That board gives you one more ounce of trouble. You don't call 911, you call my cell, directly." I had won. The hazmat team was gone. My name was cleared, and Barb and Carol had been publicly, spectacularly humiliated. As I watched them retreat into their beige fortress, their backs ramrod straight, faces contorted with a white-hot, silent fury, I knew this wasn't the end. This was the real beginning. I hadn't just angered them. I hadn't just beaten them. I had embarrassed them, in front of everyone. This was no longer about bylaws or control. It was about pure, unadulterated revenge. And they were going to come at me with everything they had. The materials for Project Gardener arrived under the cover of darkness. They weren't delivered to my house. That would have been too obvious. And Barb's eyes were everywhere. I'd had Frank ship the I-beams, the custom-forged steel bars clad in their white oak composite, and the rebar cages to an off-site commercial holding facility. I rented a U-Haul panel truck, one without king mover on the side, and drove the components to my house after midnight, backing the truck directly into my garage. For 3 nights, I worked. I was a ghost. I used a post hole digger with a sound-dampening shroud. I dug not 1, but 3. 10-foot deep holes along that 20-foot stretch of corner. I used sound-absorbing blankets around my concrete mixer, mixing small, high-psi batches by hand. It was backbreaking. It was the kind of work I hadn't done personally in 20 years. But it felt good. It felt right. I set the I-beams into the concrete, laser leveling them until they were perfect. I fabricated the custom steel brackets to hold the rails. I buried the containment loop, that hidden steel trap, 6 inches below the sod, invisible to the eye. While the concrete cured, I played the good, compliant neighbor. I drafted a meticulous request for landscaping improvement form. I submitted it, as per the CC&Rs, via certified mail. Project installation of new decorative split rail fence. 124 corner view, Doctor corner boundary. Description: replacement of existing, damaged fence. Materials: Everwood brand composite-clad steel rails, color white oak. Pre-approved on 4x4 posts. Footings: concrete footings, as per County Code 1408. Every word was technically true. The rails were composite-clad steel. The visible posts were 4x4's hollow composite sleeves that slid perfectly over the massive I-beams. The footings did meet County Code, and then exceeded it by a factor of 20. The CC&Rs stated that the ARC had 30 days to respond to a request. If they did not respond, It was automatically approved. I knew Barb and Carol, stewing in their humiliation, would either ignore it or reject it out of pure spite. But by sending it certified mail, the clock was ticking. It was the 29th night, the final night. The concrete was cured to a rock-hard 5,000 TSI. I was welding the final cap on the last I-beam, a small, quiet TIG weld. Before I slid the hollow wood post over it, it was 3:17 a.m., my new, encrypted, jam-proof cameras were recording in crystal-clear 4K. Headlights. The white Escalade. It didn't drive by. It stopped, right in the middle of the street. The engine cut. Both doors opened. This was new. They'd never both gotten out. Barb, Carol. They walked onto my lawn. They were not on an HOA inspection. Barb was holding a 2-gallon chemical sprayer, the industrial kind. I could smell the sharp, acrid scent of the herbicide from 20 feet away. The same stuff that had killed my roses. Carol was holding a tire iron. "You just don't learn, do you, Mr. Jansen?" Barb's voice was a low, venomous hiss. It was not her public HOA president voice. This was something else. This was the Duchess of Destruction. I stood up slowly, flipping up my welding mask. The small, blue-white light of my torch extinguished. I was in my black workshop coveralls, gloves on. "Go home, Barb," I said, my voice steady. "We're sick of you," she said, advancing. "We're sick of your projects. We're sick of your face. We're sick of you making us look like fools." "You did that yourselves," I said. She laughed, a short, ugly bark. "You think that win with the fire department meant anything. You just made it worse. You should have just left. Now, you'll have nothing left to leave." She started walking toward my newly planted, very expensive sod. First the grass, then the house. We know people. A little accident with an electrical box. Carol giggled. A dry, horrible, scratching sound. She hefted the tire iron. Or maybe just your windows. All of them. One by one. "Barb, that's enough," I said. "You're on my property. You're being recorded. You're threatening me." "Oh, threatening," she mimicked. "You don't know what a threat is. But you will." She stopped, just 5 feet from my new, finished fence. "You know, I was talking to my sister-in-law. She's a big deal. Works in human resources over at Apex Industries. Big city. You know." My blood froze. Apex. The defense contractor. My only consulting gig. It was my health care. It was my last link to the professional world. She said it would be a terrible shame. Barb continued, her eyes glittering with victory. If someone sent her boss an anonymous, concerned citizen tip about an unstable ex-government employee, you know, a consultant, someone stockpiling explosives, harassing his neighbors, filing false police reports, someone like you. This was it, the kill shot. She said a big, important company like that, they can't have liabilities on the payroll, especially not ones with security clearances. They'd drop you so fast. She smiled, a wide, reptilian grin. You'd have nothing. You'd be nothing. You'd just be a crazy old man in a house you can't afford, with no job, no pension. Just like your dead wife's stupid, withered flowers. That was the line, the one they should not have crossed. The patience I had cultivated, the peaceful retiree I was trying to be, evaporated. The engineer was gone. The part of me I'd buried with Sarah. The part that had designed facilities to withstand 2,000-pound car bombs. The part that dealt with warlords and terrorists. Woke up. I didn't say a word. I just looked at them. My eyes went from Barb, to Carol, to the tire iron. I bent down and picked up a 3-foot piece of steel rebar I'd had left over. I held it, feeling the solid, familiar weight in my gloved hand. Barb's smile wavered. For the first time. She looked unsure. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "We'll scream. We'll say you attacked us. 2 women, against 1 unstable man." "Go home, Barb," I said. My voice was not my own. It was flat, cold. The voice I had used in compounds in far-off, dusty places. "This is your last and final warning. What is in the ground is now permanent. You have made a tactical error." They looked confused, scared. The crazy old man was gone, and something else was looking at them. You can't stop us," Barb shrieked, her bravado returning. She raised the sprayer and pulled the trigger, dousing my new lawn, my new fence, with the poison. I didn't move. I let the chemicals hit my boots. I just stared. Carol raised the tire iron. "Get him, Barb. He's just a crazy old—" They were 10 feet away. My new fence, gleaming with herbicide but utterly unharmed, was between us. "This isn't over," Barb screamed, her voice cracking as she and Carol backed away. The tire iron now held defensively. "Tomorrow, we're calling Apex. We're calling the mayor. We're calling everyone. You are finished. Mark Jansen, you are done." They scrambled into their Escalade and tore off, cutting the corner as they always did. This time, their tires spun on my sod, but they didn't dare touch the new fence. I stood in the silence, the smell of poison hanging in the air. "No, Barb," I whispered to the empty street. "You are." I went inside. I washed my hands. I sat at my desk and made a phone call. It was 3:30 a.m. in Virginia. I didn't care. "Dave, it's Mark Jansen." "Yeah, it's been a while." "No, I'm fine. I'm retired. Remember, listen. I need a favor. A big one. I need you to run a full asset and liability investigation on 2 individuals. Yeah, domestic. Extremely hostile. Barbara Peters and Carol Peters. 1919 Willow Creek Drive. I want everything. Dave, financials, employment, social, everything. I suspect embezzlement of HOA funds, tax fraud, and I need it fast. And Dave, one more call. I need you to get General Mason on the line for me." "Yes, that General Mason. Tell him it's about Project Gardner." "No, not the old one. My new one. Tell him. Tell him it's active. And tell him I have a credible domestic threat." Saturday morning. The Willow Creek Estates, Spring Fling, BBQ, the community green, a wide-open park area, was directly across the street from my house. The entire neighborhood was there. Brenda, Gary, the mailman, families, kids on bikes. The air smelled of charcoal and cheap hot dogs. And at the center of it all, at a table draped with a Willow Creek Hoe board banner, sat Barb and Carol. They were holding court, accepting compliments on the new Community Watch program they'd clearly just invented. I was in my front yard. I was watering my new sod. The section they had sprayed, the herbicide, thankfully, had been no match for the dense, chemically resistant turf I'd installed. I was deliberately, calmly, ignoring them. My phone was in my breast pocket, connected to a single, discreet Bluetooth earpiece. Dave Reynolds was on the line, silent, just listening. The white Escalade was parked in their driveway, angled toward my house, Like a tank. Barb saw me. Her eyes narrowed. This was it. The public execution they had promised. She stood up and grabbed the community megaphone. The high-pitched screech of feedback cut through the laughter and music. Attention, Willow Creek. Attention, neighbors. Everything stopped. The music died. Kids stopped running. Every single eye in the park turned to her. And then, to me. I just kept watering the grass. It is time. Barb's voice boomed, artificially metallic. That we address the blight on our community. Mr. Mark Jansen. She pointed a long, bony finger at me. I sighed, turned off the hose. This man, she bellowed, is a danger. He has harassed your volunteer board. He has filed false police reports. He has been seen stockpiling explosive materials. A collective gasp from the crowd. Brenda clutched her pearls. And just this morning, Barb continued, her voice dripping with venom, we received a terrifying call from his former employer, Apex Industries. They are deeply concerned about his instability. They said he was let go due to erratic behavior. He is a liability who threatens us all. She was lying. A brilliant, vicious lie, twisting her threat from last night into a fait accompli. Well, we are not intimidated. We are a community of rules. The board has voted. We are here to remove the problem. Remove. Carol stood up. She walked to the back of their table and pulled a tarp off something. My blood ran cold. It was a chainsaw. A big, orange Husqvarna. Carol pulled the cord. The engine sputtered, then roared to life with a deafening, smoky burp. His new fence. Barb screamed over the din. It was installed without final, written approval. It is a violation of Section 9C, and we are removing it, as is our right under the bylaws. Carol, a horrifying, ecstatic grin on her pale face, began walking toward my fence. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, horrified, fascinated. This was it, the grand psychotic finale. Barb, Carol, stop, I said, my voice loud and clear, carrying across the sudden silence. You can't tell us what to do, Barb shrieked. This is our neighborhood. We are protecting it from you. Carol, I said, my voice flat, calm. I would not do that. That is not wood. Liar, Carol shrieked, and she lifted the roaring chainsaw, aiming for the pristine white top rail. The crowd tensed. Clap! The sound was not of wood. It was of a foundry. A blinding shower of blue and orange sparks erupted. The chainsaw blade, hitting the solid steel bar, shattered. Half the teeth exploded outward, flying into the crowd, which screamed and dove for cover. The chain itself snapped, whipping back with the force of a bullwhip, and lashed Carol across the leg. It sliced through her beige slacks, missing her flesh by a millimeter, but the force of it sent her spinning to the ground. She shrieked, a sound of pure terror and pain, dropping the now screaming, disabled saw. Barb's face went slack. Her mouth hung open. The entire neighborhood was silent, frozen. I told you, I said, walking calmly to the fence. I pulled a cloth from my back pocket. I wiped at the rail where the saw had struck. The white oak composite was barely scratched. Underneath, a gleam of polished, hardened steel shone through. What is that? Brenda stammered from the ground. That, I said, my voice carrying to every person in the park, is an A572 grade solid steel bar, clad in a proprietary composite. The posts, those are 12-foot, 80-pound per foot steel I-beams, sunk 10 feet into $5,000 PSI reinforced concrete footings. It's a Department of State certified K-12 rated anti-ram barrier. Blank stares, I simplified. It's designed, I said, to stop a 15,000-pound truck driving at 50 miles per hour. Barb was ashen. You can't. That's illegal. That's a weapon. Is it? I asked. I submitted the paperwork. Decorative fence, which it is. Concrete footings, as per county code, which they are. And then some HOA-approved composite material, which this is. You had 30 days to reject it. You didn't. As of 2 days ago, it is 100% compliant with the very CC&Rs you love to quote. But why? Gary asked, his voice trembling as he helped his wife up. Because they, I said, pointing to the sisters, one on the ground, one frozen in horror, kept running over my old one, on purpose, and I got tired of replacing it. I turned back to Barb. Now, my turn. I tapped my earpiece. Dave, you live. We're live, Mark. Dave's voice said. It wasn't in my ear. It was now booming from my phone's speaker, which I'd turned to full volume. Who is that? Barb whispered. This, I announced, is Dave Reynolds. He is the global head of security for Apex Industries, the company you claim to have contacted me about. Barb's eyes went wide. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Ms. Barbara Peters, Dave's voice said, sharp and cold as a winter wind. We have no sister-in-law of yours on our HR staff. We do, however, have a digital log of a 14-minute call you made this morning to our public corporate tip line. A call in which you falsely identified yourself as a city official and leveled numerous baseless, slanderous, and provably false accusations against Mr. Mark Jansen. Barb started to hyperventilate. Mr. Jansen, Dave continued, is not unstable. He is one of our most respected senior consultants, responsible for safeguarding over a dozen of our international facilities. Your attempt to defame him and interfere with his security clearance is a federal crime. Our legal team will be in touch by Monday, or, more likely, in person. As if on cue, 2 cars pulled up to the curb. They were not police cars. They were black sedans. Out of the first stepped Fire Chief Miller. Out of the second stepped a man in a crisp, dark suit I didn't recognize. Barbara and Carol Peters, Chief Miller said, his voice a low rumble. I'm Chief Miller, he announced to the stunned crowd. Last week, these 2 women filed a false 911 report, claiming Mr. Jansen had a bomb lab. They wasted over $10,000 in city and county resources. As of this morning, the DA has approved the charges. They are both under arrest for felony misuse of emergency services. The crowd erupted in a roar of murmurs. And I, the suited man said, stepping forward, his voice quiet but carrying, am Special Agent Klein, from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. If Carol hadn't already been on the ground, she would have fainted. Mr. Reynolds' private investigation, Klein said, nodding to my phone, was very, very thorough. It seems the Willow Creek HOA hasn't actually filed taxes on its fines in 6 years, and it seems 2 individuals, a president and a treasurer, have been embezzling those funds over $80,000 into a private, undeclared offshore account. Now, Carol did faint. She just rolled over, out cold. Barb looked around, her eyes wild, cornered. From me, to Miller, to Klein. Her entire world was disintegrating in real time. And then her eyes landed on her Escalade. She made a run for it. "Don't do it, Barb," I yelled. She wasn't trying to escape. She was trying to attack. She jumped into the massive SUV, cranked the engine. The crowd screamed. She floored it, peeling out of her driveway, not onto the street, but across the street, directly at me, at my fence, the fence she'd been hitting for months. "She's lost it!" Gary screamed. The huge, 6,000-pound vehicle rocketed across the lawn, aiming right for the corner post, the very post she'd destroyed twice before. It hit. It was not a crash. It was a stop. There was a sound like a giant, angry church bell being struck, a deafening, metallic gong. The Escalade's front end disintegrated. The frame buckled. The engine block, hitting the solid steel I-beam, was pushed back into the dashboard. Both airbags deployed. The entire vehicle, from a speed of 30 miles per hour, stopped in less than 2 inches of travel. It was as if it had hit a mountain. And the fence. It didn't move. It didn't shake. It didn't even tremble. The Escalade was totaled, steam and poison-green antifreeze pouring from its crumpled hood, its alarm wailing a soundtrack to its own demise. Silence. Utter. Profound silence. Broken only by the car alarm and the distant, approaching sound of the actual police sirens Chief Miller had called for. I walked over to the fence. I looked at the post the SUV was now accordioned against. A tiny flake of pearlescent white paint was stuck to my wood-grain composite. I brushed it off with my thumb. I turned to the stunned, silent crowd. I looked at the IRS agent. I looked at the fire chief. "She'll also be charged with assault with a deadly weapon," I said, "and reckless endangerment." Agent Klein nodded, already on his phone. "I'd say that's accurate. Mr. Jansen, I'd say that's very accurate." The aftermath was as swift and total as the Escalade's impact. Barb and Carol were extracted from their lives as cleanly as my fence had extracted them from their vehicle. Barb, after being cut from the wreck with a broken wrist and a shattered ego, faced the heaviest charges: assault with a deadly weapon, the SUV, felony misuse of emergency services, and the federal charges for tax evasion and embezzlement. The slander case from Apex was just the cherry on top. With a long, documented history of petty tyranny now eagerly provided by her former neighbors, the judge showed no mercy. She received a sentence of 7 years in federal prison. Carol, having regained consciousness in the back of a police car, sang like a canary. She turned state's evidence against her sister, revealing the years of skimming, the secret accounts, and the pure, malicious joy they took in their reign. Her cooperation, coupled with the chainsaw incident which her lawyer successfully argued was a result of coercive control, got her a lighter sentence, 2 years, plus 5 years probation, and full restitution to the HOA and to me, for the poisoned soil and the repeated property damage. Their beige castle, the HOA office, was seized by the IRS and sold at auction. The proceeds were used to pay the HOA's massive back tax bill and to refund every single fine they had levied for the past 3 years. My escrow account was returned, and a hefty check for damages arrived soon after. The Willow Creek Estates HOA, in its current form, was dissolved by the state. Chief Miller and my old friend, General Mason, who, it turned out, wields a lot of quiet influence in state politics, personally oversaw the community meeting to rewrite the CC&Rs from scratch. The new rules are simple: be safe, be clean, maintain your property, and don't be a tyrant. The ridiculous approved cultivar list was used as kindling at the next neighborhood BBQ, which was held on my lawn. I was elected, against my vocal protests, as the new community liaison, My only job is to mediate disputes, of which there are now precisely 0. The neighborhood healed. Brenda, from 2 streets over, brought me a new peace rosebush, which I planted in the now thriving, poison-free soil. She apologized profusely, explaining how afraid everyone had been of the sisters, Gary, from the cul-de-sac. Now barbecues with me on weekends. We talk about cars. He's deeply, deeply impressed with my fence. My life is quiet now. The true, living quiet I came here for. I tinker in my workshop. I consult for Apex, where I'm now treated with a mixture of awe and slight fear. My lawn is green. My new roses are blooming. And my fence stands. It's a silent monument, freshly painted, looking for all the world like a charming, ordinary split-rail fence. It's a testament to the fact that peace is something you have to build. And sometimes, you have to over-engineer it, just in case.